Hello, my name is Jimmy Bonero, and in this video I'm going to talk about migrating a configuration file that utilizes the Konica Minolta MFP, also known as the Konica Minolta Open API capture component, and move that config file from one version of AutoStore into another. In particular, we could be moving a config file from AutoStore 6 Express Edition over into AutoStore 6 Workflow Edition. Or we could be moving an AutoStore 6 configuration file that utilizes the Konica Minolta Open API capture component into AutoStore 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our Konica Minolta capture component, and I've got a simple form here that I'm going to click on Edit. So the first thing is going to be when we're using a form script, we'll run into a little bit of an issue, but because we're in AutoStore 6 right now, and because this configuration was built on an AutoStore 6 server using the same edition of AutoStore, I'm just going to click on the compile button and just show that we don't have any errors. We're not going to focus on the contents of the script. We simply just want to compile this inside of the same version that we actually created everything on, and you'll notice that everything is compiling just fine. Now what I'm going to do is move over to an AutoStore 7 server, and inside of here I've got that same config file open inside of a shared storage location. So I'm going to launch AutoStore 7, which is a different version, and I've got that config file opened immediately. I'm going to open up the Konica Minolta capture component, select that form, and I'm going to click on the Create Edit Snap-in button to open up the script editor. Now here I'm going to click on compile, and you'll notice immediately I have 4 errors in which it's saying that the metadata file for autostore.interop.batchobj.dll could not be found, and the rest of these are very similar. Each of these 4 assemblies are part of AutoStore, or they are AutoStore specific assemblies. And what's problematic is not necessarily the file itself, but the path to the file, because on AutoStore 6 this is not the same path to the AutoStore directory. So let's go ahead and correct that. I'm going to go ahead and just move this out of the way, come over to my config file, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to open it with Notepad++. If I scroll down just a little bit, you'll notice that inside of the config file itself, these references are stored inside of the config. And again, we've got the path to the actual AutoStore directory, and we've got each individual file that it needs to reference in order for that script to work. So what I'm going to do is talk about 2 different ways in which we can correct this issue. First is we can actually modify the config file itself. If you've ever done that before, then this shouldn't be new to you. You can just, inside of Notepad++ or your favorite text editor, you can go ahead and just modify it directly in here. So navigating into the AutoStore 7 directory inside of Program Files x86 Notable Solutions, AutoStore 7, if I scroll down just a little bit further, we'll find the first assembly that it can't find, which is autostore.interop.batchobj.dll. Now what I really need is this path. So I'm going to select and copy that, and I'm going to come over to my first reference, and I'm going to replace the old reference with the new reference. I'll do that for the second one. Alright, and the name of my config file is KMExample AS6. I want to save as AS7. Alright, and now I'm going to go ahead and just close this all out. And again, I've only made the change to 2 of the references so we can see what happens. So now I'm going to click Open, and I'm going to go to my shared location. Oops, sorry. All right, and I'm going to open my AS7 file that I just saved. Okay. I'm going to take the AS6, I'm just going to close that so we're not confused. All right, and now I'm going to click on the Konica Minolta capture components, select the form, click edit, click on create edit snap-in. All right, and now I'm going to click on compile. All right, now you'll notice I actually only have 2 errors because the references are correct for 2 of them. So we modify the config file directly. That's the first way we could do it. As you could see, that was actually a very easy way to do it. Now there is a second way to do it. Once you're in the script editor, next to the compile button, there is a button called References. This is available inside of the script editor only. When I click on the References button, you can see now where I have those 2 changes that I made previously indicated right here. So the second way we can do this is in here we can actually change this. Now I only have 2 assemblies that I need to correct. Inside of the AutoStore 7 directory, I really need to reference the KMO API capture DLL file and the NSI net util.dll. So it's a little clunky, to be honest, but what we want to do, if you click on a file path and you click on it one more time, it essentially toggles it off and on. Okay, I want to find the KMO API capture assembly. There's a browse button right here which will allow me to navigate to the assembly that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to clear these out by toggling that back off. I'm going to click on my browse button here and I'm going to navigate over to the program files x86 folder. We're going to go into Notable Solutions, AutoStore 7. Now we're looking for KMO API. Capture. Okay, KMO API capture. I'm going to click on Open. Now, I just want to look at this second path to make sure I actually have the right file, which I do. Now, I'm going to select this entire path. I'm going to right click and copy this just for a second because I want to show you what happens when we click on Add Reference. You'll notice that when I do that, it's trying to add this assembly, but it's not able to. And the reason why is because this is still in here, meaning this reference to KMO API capture, even though the directory is incorrect, because this is in here, it won't let me add this. What I have to do is I have to select it, and you'll notice that when I selected it, it actually replaced the text that I selected here in the reference name, and I just got finished browsing. Well, that's the reason why I copied that entire path first before I did anything. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this, and what I need to do is I need to delete it by clicking on this delete button. Alright, now that I've clicked on the delete button, you'll notice that reference is gone, and because it's still in my clipboard, I'm going to place the right path in there so I don't have to browse to it again. And I'm going to click Add Reference, and now it adds that reference in there. Alright, now I have, well, you'll notice if I click on these, I can multiple select and all that. I need to correct this final one here. So NSI net util.dll. All right. The reason I'm browsing first is I just want to make sure that I'm actually recalling the proper name when I actually select it. So I'm going to navigate over to the NSI net util file, which is right here. When I click Open, it has the correct path. Again, I'm going to right click, copy. Now I'm just going to select this file. It toggles it off and on, but I need to have it selected. I want to make sure that this is actually what's being deleted. So I'm going to select that, click on Delete, and now I'm going to paste that path in, click Add Reference, and I've got my final reference placed. All these are now pointing into the AutoStore 7 directory. I'm going to click OK, and the final test will be to compile, and you'll notice I have no more errors and this is now ready to go. So let me click on, well, before I click close, you'll notice that I didn't make any changes to the form script itself, so there's nothing for me to save here. The references have already been saved, so now I can go ahead and close out my script editor. When you're moving a config file from one edition of AutoStore into another edition, this will be one of the things that you could possibly run into, but it's when you're using a form script inside of any of your forms. Okay. The second thing that you want to be aware of, I'm going to click OK, is I'm going to click on the Preferences tab inside of the Konica Minolta MFP component. This is probably something that will get everybody that moves a config over, because inside of the config, another thing that is stored is the IP address of the AutoStore server itself. And the second item that you see here where it says server address, this IP address is actually the IP address of the server that I saved it on. And if I click on the drop down, you'll notice that in this list there's only one address in here, and that is the address to the server that I'm currently on right now. When I select this item here, it will essentially replace that because it's a standard list box, but this old reference to the old server is not valid, especially if I'm going to be running AutoStore on this server and I want this to be the config that gets pushed out. This is how we let the device know how to come back to the AutoStore server to get its forms and where to send the documents over to when they're being transferred from the device over to the AutoStore server for processing. So all I need to do is really just come down, select this drop down. This will show the current address of the server that I'm on right now. When I click on that, I've now replaced that. Okay, so that'll be the second thing. This will always be something when you move from one server to another that you'll definitely run into, regardless of whether you're using a form script or not. Finally, the other thing that you might want to take a look at, I'm going to come back into the General tab. Most of the time this isn't going to be an issue for you at all, but if you select the default group and you click Edit, in the Konica Minolta OpenAPI Capture component, there's what's called the AutoStore button text. This will be the button that the users will see to know this is how I access the AutoStore application. In this particular case, I call that button AS6. Because we're on an AS7 server, I might want to just replace that with AS7. Of course, I could always just call it AutoStore, or I could call it scanning. This is really the, or call it scan. This is how the users see the main button when they're at the main screen of the device. But I'm going to just call this AS7 for now, and I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click OK one more time. All right, so those are 3 changes that we made to the config. First was updating the reference for form script if your form has a form script. Second is the IP address of the AutoStore server that's being referenced. And finally, in the default group, you might want to look at the name of the AutoStore button that users access. All of these things are stored inside of the config file itself. And when you're moving or migrating from one AutoStore server, but more importantly from one AutoStore edition into a new server, because perhaps you did an upgrade from AutoStore 6 to AutoStore 7, or you did an upgrade from AutoStore 6 Express into AutoStore 6 Workflow, those will be some of the things that you'd run into. The final thing I'm going to do now, again, I've got KM example AS7. I'm just going to save my config file so that way all the changes that I made were saved. And then I'm going to go ahead and start the configuration file, and we'll see if everything starts up okay. And it appears that we are in good shape. If there were any issues, we would not see this show up. You'd actually see some type of an error or some type of an issue. Okay, and then of course the final test is you want to go over to the device and make sure that you can actually scan something and that all your functionality is still present. So at any rate, I hope this video has been informative, and until next time, thanks for watching.